There was a time, not so long ago, that I tried everything for my children of light, the angels, the humans. There was a time where everything was made and I saw it as good, it was great. But alas, hubris was always my downfall. My children called me infallible, as children often do with their parents. In the beauty of their innocence, children see the best of the ones that they call mother or father. But, unfortunately for them, I made mistakes and they paid the price. My children, scattered, divided, were at each other's throats. I would intervene. But the lesson was never learnt. I was the scapegoat, the solution to all their problems. They would beg and plead for me to crush their enemies, and their enemies would beg of me the same. How does one parent take a side when all their children are wrong? How does one keep the peace between them all? Punishment? Rewards? No, it would only create bitterness and jealousy. They would fight over the words in the old books, words that were badly translated or manipulated to their own ends. Over land that they were meant to be the caretakers of. Not fighting over arid sands and black liquid buried beneath the surface of the world. Or fighting for bits of paper that were entirely worthless. Or fighting to carry favor with me. How can one repair such a broken world? Of course, people would say, "Show yourself!" Or, "If you really loved us, you would come and get rid of evil or starvation or cancer." It is in the nature of humans to rebel, to fight to be free. That's why they rebelled against me, an event that repeated itself through history, taunting me with my own hubris. People had to learn to be kind to one another, to love one another. I cannot and will not force that upon them, because if I did there would be no meaning to it, no feeling behind it. No, I was the part of the equation that needed removing. And honestly, I think it's been for the better. LGBT, transgender rights, gay marriage, all these were good things, they are good things. My love was unconditional, so why shouldn't theirs be? Who am I to say who they can love and who they can't? Some would say because I put the rules in place, or because I made them. When a parent procures offspring, is that offspring under their complete command for the rest of their lives? No. The last time I directly intervened in the affairs of the world was when I ordered my angelic warriors to descend to the earth to wipe out the first of a new species, a species that I at first considered to be an affront to the world because of the danger they posed. Like the watchers before them, a demon, a fallen angel fell in love with a werewolf of the purest strain of lycanthropy. The most primeval of lichens. More wolf than human. I feared what this wolf could do to the world, especially as he got older. His demonic blood and werewolf heart mixed angrily, causing the wolf pup to be poisoned into insanity. Although the demon's influence was as evil as it came, he coerced his own offspring into doing evil. His blood just made it easier for him to commit horrid acts along with the strange powers he got from his demonic father. The biggest regret of a very, very long and tired existence was the purges I ordered because of my own self-absorption. Like a careless surgeon, I opted for amputation for a laceration that could easily be fixed with stitches and some tender, loving care. My angels descended and smote the entire Führer subspecies out of existence. All of them. So that a demon could never create such a vicious creature again. 20,000 wolves dead within an hour. Of course, other wolves could produce another hellhound down the line, but none the likes of the one they made. A wolf with the ability to smite. To kill other angels, claws with properties of ethereal steel. An unholy, unnatural lifespan. Immune to silver. Immune to conventional weapons even in human form. See where I'm going with this? Had its own progeny spread across the earth, hellhounds would be the dominant form of life on the earth. And so I watched as they killed and slaughtered families on my orders. I realized why my angels fell and become evil, wretched things, because I had made them in my image, and my image could be as monstrous as they came. So I realized I needed to step away and leave them to learn to be better than me. Eventually the world noticed my absence, I stayed silent. And eventually the world moved on. I was no longer fact, I was a superstition, a fairy tale. Of course there were those that believed, as they were free to do. Since that day I have sat and observed. I took joy in the happiness they brought to themselves. Sure, they fall, they stumble, and still commit the same wrongdoings as they always did, fighting, killing, stealing, making other lives miserable. But I see love, acceptance, loyalty, forgiveness, and absolution. I see it through the stories they tell, the lives they lead, the words they write, the songs they sing. It's not such a bad world after all. There are not like me. They're better. Whilst I didn't directly intervene, It doesn't mean I didn't do anything that pushed things in the right direction. For example, there was a war fought over 80 years ago, and I made sure a certain dictator stayed asleep, whilst the soldiers landed on the beaches, and fought their way through bunkers and trenches on the coast of France. Or that a country gained a leader that steered his country into not surrendering. Whilst the alternative, more popular choice, would have surrendered and the world would have been at the mercy of the swastika. But I'm sure you're wondering why I am here now, telling you, dear reader, all this. Where's the fun if I let you have all answers? I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. But I will say this. All they needed was a little push. Line break. Wednesday hit the floor as she appeared several feet of the ground, letting out a groan as her leg bent inward awkwardly, causing extreme discomfort. Then she remembered the events that took place mere moments before. She brandished the dagger. Her face was ablaze with anger. "Show yourself to me, you coward!" she screamed, her braids whipping back and forth angrily. As to be expected, there was no answer from the one she believed she had just been in contact with. If that was who she thought it was, then she wanted answers. She wanted to know what his game was, what sort of sick, twisted plans he had for her. It was too easy getting out of the abyss this time, especially since the main way took a good 2 years to traverse and fight. He wouldn't leave a back exit for any number of demons to possibly find and escape. There was a flash of light that made Wednesday shield her eyes briefly before she looked up to see a small slip of paper floating down to the ground. It was like it taunted her as it glided its way down past her nose. Her arm flew up to grasp the piece of paper in her hand. She trembled as she lifted the paper to her eyes and read the words that adorned it. No, she felt her fist tighten, crumpling the message. Her hand shook with rage. "You think you're so fucking funny, don't you?" Her eyes darkened, looking diseased and bloodshot, as sulfur ignited the blood in her veins as fury raced through her. There was another flash of light, and Wednesday watched as another slip of paper gently floated toward her. She raised her hand, and it flew into her hand, and she lifted it to see whatever message was bestowed upon it. "Yep. I'm not playing these games with you anymore, go fuck yourself," she hissed, leaving the 2 pieces of paper on the floor as she marched away. She looked up and saw Nevermore in the distance. She was about to reach the outermost part of the grounds that would lead her straight back to Enid. As she approached, there was a shimmering light in front of her that seemed to race around the section of field that she was in and vanishing into the tress on both sides. She paused a mere foot from the barrier. Angel warding, she noted bitterly. She reached up a hand, and her palm was a mere inch from the barrier. She wasn't technically an angel anymore. She still had her angelic grace, the source of her power and what made her, her. Grace was what the soul was to humans. She knew if she touched the barrier, she would be hurt, depending on how strong the warding was. She took a deep breath and let her fingers move forward. And the veil wrapped round her hand like silk, allowing her hand to flow freely to the other side. She took a tentative step forwards and allowed the rest of her body to follow suit. The veil gave way and she found herself on the other side of it. Nevermore's students would never see it, just the casters and the angels that it was meant to keep out. She stared suspiciously at it for a moment before she spun on her heel and marched up towards the school, sheathing her dagger as she walked. She didn't see or hear the fingers that snapped, allowing her to pass through the barrier unharmed, nor the second snap that powered the barrier as she walked off. Line break. "So, you have returned." It wasn't a question but a statement. Wednesday glared at the imposing figure of principal of the school. "It would appear so," she replied back neutrally. Weems moved to sit back behind her desk, her right side illuminated by the cackling fire. "I had to inform Mr. and Mrs. Adams of your disappearance, and now I will do so for your return." Wednesday merely nodded. Questions burned in the back of her mind. It all seemed a little too easy. She too sat down in one of the chairs facing the main desk. "However," Weems said, "there was always a however. I wish to know how you managed to get past the angel warding." A more panic-inclined being would give the game away, but Wednesday knew the game was already up. All that mattered was how she handled her defeat. "You know," Wednesday said, dark eyes searching the school matriarchs. Weems smiled slightly. "I know," she confirmed. "How?" Weems sighed. "When an angel, fully prepared for battle, turns up at MY school, I happen to know they only show up for several reasons, only one of which could possibly be possible or probable." Wednesday nodded. "Also the fact that bastard opened up a portal to down there on school grounds and dragged a student into it says a lot. So what now?" Wednesday asked. Weems sighed stressfully. Truthfully? I don't know. I can't force you out of this school physically. The Adams say you are trustworthy, and I hold their word in high regard. Although they wouldn't tell me the reason as to why you were here, they thought it best to let you explain when you got out. Smart of them to assume that. Thing chose that moment to crawl up onto Wednesday's shoulder. It gave Weems a joyful wave, who smiled joyously at the dismembered hand. Hello, Thing, Weems greeted. Gomez attended Nevermore with him in tow. They got into a lot of mischief together, Weems said fondly, thinking to her own schooldays in the past. I'm here because of Enid, Wednesday said, her eyes going soft for the briefest of moments. Weems caught it. As a head teacher of a school, she was eagle-eyed to the extreme. Ah. Curiouser and curiouser, Weems said with a twinkle in her eyes. Why? Must I explain it to you? Wednesday growled out between gritted teeth. Humor an old woman, she replied. I'm older than you, Wednesday quipped back. That I'm well aware of, so tell me, why would a demon be here for a girl that seems to be made of light and color? Wednesday side-eyed the fire and huffed, her nostrils flaring. Esther Sinclair has been abusing Enid. It was fascinating to watch Weems' face go from joy to thundering rage. Weems was a terrifying sight to behold. I knew it. I knew there was something going on there, but I could never prove it, and Enid would never say anything. That bitch! The shout was torn from Weems' throat like the roar of a dragon. The abuse runs deeper and farther than you know. If it wasn't for pack law and normie law, Enid would be dead already, Wednesday said in disgust. Weems gasped. She wouldn't. She never said it, but I could feel her utter disregard for her. She would have killed her long before now. Weems was now pacing up and down behind her desk. I always knew there was something wrong with Esther. She was in the year above me, and something never seemed quite right in the head with her. You'll be happy to know I tortured and mutilated her for 3 weeks whilst I was at Enid's disguised as a raven. It was quite delightful. Weems stopped her pacing to look at the 5-foot demon. I plan to continue when I return to Enid's home at the end of the semester, Wednesday stated proudly. Weems' own face cracked its own smile, slightly twisted in nature. Good, good, we both want to protect Enid. We can do that here, at Nevermore. I promised Esther if she ever harmed Enid again I would drag her into the pit myself. For now stay with Enid, keep her safe, keep her happy. I will deal with Esther if I can, Weems said, placing her hands to lean on the back of her chair. I plan to do that, with or without your permission, Wednesday said curtly, although Weems could see the undercurrent of satisfaction in her face. Wednesday too rose to her feet, and suddenly she felt nervous. How was she? Wednesday asked. Weems' face grew soft, seeing the concern Wednesday had for Enid. Mostly? She's been depressed. The faculty have all been keeping an eye on her. She hasn't eaten much, doesn't participate in class at all, she looks tired all the time. Her usual clubs have noticed her absence. Wednesday held up a hand, no longer wanting to hear it. It was obvious to her what Enid had been feeling. She was mourning a broken heart. She knew that werewolves would die without their mate. Their heart too broken to go on. It was her fault. But she planned to rectify it as soon as possible. I wish to return to her now. Weems merely nodded. Wednesday gracefully turned and made her way to the door, grasping the knob before she turned to look at the headmistress in the eyes. There are not many humans I find tolerable, Principal Weems. I am contented to say you are one of them. Good night to you, Wednesday said as she let the door close behind her. Weems simply smiled as she opened her laptop and began drafting a new email. Line break. Wednesday stood a mere 20 feet at the bottom of the staircase that led to Ophelia Hall. She noted with irony she had found herself in such a similar position before when Enid had ran after their shared vision. She could feel the pain rolling off of Enid in waves. How could the school not feel it? How could they not drown in it? Or suffocate in it? Enid's sorrow drenched the halls. And Wednesday found that her legs would not obey her. As they walked towards Ophelia Hall, every footfall an earthquake, or a thunderclap as she ascended above. Is this what humans felt when they eventually ascended to the fields of Elysium? The eternal gardens? To flowing pastures? The golden forests? Wednesday knew that whatever heaven was to humans, nothing would ever match what Enid represented to Wednesday. It was better than heaven, better than the abyss, better than any other conceivable paradise. Eden would never compare to her. Everything fell away. The world could have started to burn, angels could have descended to enact genocide, volcanoes could erupt, the universe could rip itself apart, and begin again, and yet it wouldn't turn her attention away from the sight in front of her. She stood at the top of the stairs, watching the door to their room, as Enid, eyes downcast, red and puffy, stepped out from their room. Toothbrush and PJs in hand. Her nose wrinkled, her eyes widened as her nose picked up the familiar scent. It wasn't like the one in their room, this one was fresh as a swift sunrise. She blinked, her head rose to see Wednesday stood mere meters away. Hands down by her side. Large black overcoat engulfing her figure, the hint of a white shirt and black tie underneath. But it was her. Their eyes met, Enid's wide, inflated, she dare not blink, lest her mind were playing tricks on her, and she vanished from sight. Wednesday's eyes held adoration and love for the girl stood in front of her. Enid spoke first. "You're alive!" Her voice was hoarse, scratchy, she hadn't used her voice for days, parched of water that she had refused to drink, content to wither away and join Wednesday on the other side. Toothbrush and PJs tumbled to the floor was a clatter, shaking Wednesday out of her stupor, in time to catch the blur of color that was Enid flying towards her faster than a human could see. And Wednesday found herself wrapped up in a werewolf's incredibly strong grip, arms squeezed around her desperately making sure she was real and that she didn't go anywhere. Wednesday brought her arms up to encircle her wolf. Enid's body shook with sobs. "You're alive! You're alive!" Her voice desperate, as she choked through her tears. Wednesday felt her grace shatter. Hearing the pain laced in her words was something she never wanted to hear again. Wednesday tightened her hold as they both fell to their knees as Enid clung to every inch of her as much as she could. "SSSSHHH," Wednesday cooed, her hand came up to cup Enid's head lovingly. Her fingers weaved into her hair, feeling the softness of her blonde locks, nails gently massaged her scalp as she tried to comfort the hysterical werewolf. Enid's fingers curled around Wednesday's coat desperately, trying to pull in much of Wednesday as possible, inhaling her scent like a drug, letting her fill her entire being. Enid had always been clingy, she knew this, but this was a whole other level. "Never leave me again!" Her voice was an octane above a whisper. Wednesday felt herself nod her head against her shoulder. Enid nuzzled her cheek against the Goth's, scenting her, marking her, making her hers. Enid took Wednesday by the hand, fingers interlocked, and dragged the raven into their room, letting the door slam behind them. Wednesday allowed herself to be dragged to the colorful side of Enid's room. Enid pulled down Wednesday until onto her bed. She watched bemused as Enid marched over to a closet and dragged several fresh bed covers from the closet, and then throwing them at Wednesday, who caught them. Enid lay down beside her and covered them both with the fresh covers. "Enid, what are you doing?" Wednesday asked as she continued to watch Enid tuck them both under a mountain of covers. "Making sure you don't leave me again," Enid answered, a blush adorning her cheeks. "I would stay by your side until the end of all things, Enid. Nothing can keep you away from me, not Weems, not your mother, not my family, not death itself." Enid paused, mid-action, her face came up, her eyes moist. "Did you die?" Enid asked. She could see the werewolf was trembling. "Being torn from you felt like death, mea lupa," she said honestly. Enid smiled as she pulled herself under the covers and lay her head on the pillow. Her hand ran through the ridiculous amount of cloth and cotton to seek out Wednesday's hand. Their fingers gently interlocked, she brought them up between their chests as Wednesday shifted to lay on her side to gaze in wonder in Enid's golden blue eyes. "Wednesday, do you think we're moving too fast?" Enid asked, her eyes never leaving the raven. "What do you mean?" Wednesday asked. She didn't even blink, the depth of her love prevented her from doing so. Enid sighed slightly. "I mean that we have only known each for a few days, but I feel like I have known you forever." Wednesday thought for a small moment. Every second could be long as an eternity, and it still wouldn't be enough time with you, so no. Enid sighed happily, snuggling in closer to Wednesday, who wrapped her free hand around the other girl's waist. "So you don't want to change out of your clothes into your PJs?" Enid shook her head and snuggled her face straight into Wednesday's neck, who felt a shot of electricity shoot straight through her spine and through her body. "Scumfy," Enid muttered, her grasp on Wednesday not loosening. "Anything for you, my Enid," Wednesday said, pressing a small kiss to the top of Enid's head. As Enid let herself drift off to the first peaceful sleep she had in a week, Wednesday was content to lay with her wolf. Even with a human body she would not need the same amount of sleep as a human did, but as she looked at the ceiling there was a small spark of lightning and another piece of paper burst into existence, its edges burning as it floated down to Wednesday, who watched it with utter contempt. She watched it hit the floor, but the words were clear as day. You both have my blessing.